Hi, welcome to English Flow. Have you ever tried to learn English but felt confused or stuck? Maybe you know some words and grammar, but speaking is still hard. I've been there too, and I'm here to help. In today's video, I'll share simple tips that helped me go from being nervous to speaking confidently. Whether you're just starting or want to improve, this channel is all about easy English you can use every day. Stay with me, and by the end of this video, you'll see how learning English can be simple and fun. Hi, I'm Mike, and today I want to share my story about learning English. I wasn't always good at it. In fact, I struggled a lot in the beginning, but over time I found some useful tips and methods that really helped me, and I believe they can help you too, no matter what level you're at. So let's start from the very beginning of my journey. When I first decided to learn English, I didn't know where to start. There were so many things to learn: words, grammar rules, pronunciation. It all felt like too much at once. I remember feeling overwhelmed, wondering how I could possibly remember all of it. But one day I realized something important. I didn't need to learn everything at once. You see, learning English or any language is like building a house. You need to start with the foundation. So I began by focusing on the basics, the things I would use in my daily life. For me, that was simple words and phrases, greetings, introductions, and common questions. Words like hello, thank you, how are you, and goodbye. I even kept a small notebook with me to write down new words and review them when I had free time. At first, speaking English in front of others made me nervous. I was so afraid of making mistakes. But here's the thing. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. I made a lot of them, but instead of getting upset, I learned from each one. Every time I said something wrong, I just tried again until I got it right. And that's another important tip. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more you practice, the better you'll get. One thing that helped me a lot was listening to English as much as I could. I used to think I needed to understand every single word, but that's not true. Just listening regularly to English, whether it's music, TV shows, or podcasts, helps your brain get used to the language. For example, I used to listen to a radio show from London while commuting to work here in Edinburgh. At first, I didn't understand everything, but over time my listening skills improved without me even realizing it. Here's a tip that made learning more enjoyable. Find something you love in English. For me, it was TV shows. I started watching a series I liked with subtitles in my own language. After a while, I switched to English subtitles. Finally, I tried watching it without any subtitles at all. It was hard, but it helped a lot. And because I was watching something I enjoyed, it didn't feel like studying. It felt like fun. Another thing I struggled with was pronunciation. Sometimes I knew the words, but people still couldn't understand me because I didn't pronounce them correctly. It was frustrating, but I found a solution. I started practicing out loud, even if I was just talking to myself. I would say new words over and over again until they sounded right. I also used online dictionaries with audio, so I could hear how the words were supposed to sound. This was especially useful when I learned words that sounded very different from how they were spelled. And now, let's talk about grammar. Oh, grammar was tough for me at first. It felt like a huge mountain to climb. I couldn't remember all the rules, and I kept mixing them up. But then I realized something important. You don't need perfect grammar to communicate. Grammar is important, yes, but don't let it stop you from speaking. It's okay to make small mistakes as long as people understand you. So I focused on getting my point across, and as I got more comfortable, I slowly improved my grammar. I also started reading in English. At first, I read children's books because they were simple and had pictures to help me understand. Then I moved on to short stories, and eventually I started reading online articles. I didn't always understand every word, but I got the main idea, and that's what mattered. Reading helped me learn new words in context, which made it easier to remember them later. One of the most important things I learned was consistency. If you want to improve your English, you need to practice regularly. I set a goal to practice at least 15 minutes every day. Some days I did more, and some days I did less, but I always did something, whether it was speaking, listening, reading, or writing. It wasn't always easy, but over time I saw real progress. Speaking of writing, this is another tip. Practice writing in English. I started by writing short messages to friends, and later I tried journaling. Writing helped me organize my thoughts and think about the language in a different way. It also gave me a chance to practice grammar and vocabulary without the pressure of speaking in front of others. One day, I found a language exchange partner online. This was a game changer for me. We would chat in English for a while, and then we would switch to my native language so we could help each other. Finding someone to practice with is one of the best things you can do. It's not just about learning the language, it's about building confidence too. The more you practice with someone else, the easier it becomes to speak in real-life situations. Another tip that worked for me was labeling things around my house with sticky notes. I wrote the English words for everyday objects like table, door, and fridge, and every time I saw them, I would say the word out loud. It may seem like a small thing, but these little reminders helped me learn vocabulary without even realizing it. And here's something else that really helped. Thinking in English. At first, I always thought in my own language and then translated it in my head, but this took too long, and I often got stuck trying to find the right words. So I started trying to think directly in English, even if it was just simple thoughts like, I'm hungry, or I need to go to the store. The more I did it, the easier it became, and soon I didn't have to translate everything in my head anymore. One important thing I learned along the way was to ask questions whenever I didn't understand something. In the beginning, I was shy and didn't want to seem dumb, but I realized that asking questions is the best way to learn. Whether it was about a word, a phrase, or a grammar rule, I asked my teacher, friends, or even people online. The more questions I asked, the more confident I became in using the language. Let me share a funny moment from my early days of learning English. I was practicing with a friend, and after we ate a big meal, I wanted to say, I'm full, but instead I said, I'm fool. My friend burst out laughing, and I had no idea why until they explained the difference between full and fool. At first I was embarrassed, but then I laughed too. And that's another tip. Laugh at your mistakes. If you take everything too seriously, it's easy to get discouraged, but if you can laugh and learn from it, you'll feel more relaxed and confident. Finally, remember to be patient. Learning a language takes time, and there will be moments when you feel frustrated or stuck. I remember feeling like I wasn't improving fast enough, and there were days when I wanted to give up. But I reminded myself that learning English isn't a race. Everyone learns at their own pace, and it's okay if it takes time. So to sum up, learning English has been a challenging but rewarding journey for me. I used a combination of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and consistent practice to improve. I made mistakes, asked questions, and found ways to make learning fun. Most importantly, I never gave up, and neither should you. Whether you're just starting or you've been learning for a while, remember that every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Now it's your turn to put these tips into practice. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, ask questions, and find ways to enjoy the process. With time and effort, you'll get better, just like I did. When I first started learning English, I had to remind myself that it's okay to take time. There were moments when I felt stuck, like I wasn't making any progress. I'd study hard but still feel like I wasn't getting anywhere. However, I soon realized that even small steps, like understanding a new word or having a short conversation without getting nervous, were still progress. Sometimes the progress was so small that I didn't even notice it right away. But it was there. I learned that the key to learning a language is patience. You can't expect to become fluent overnight, and that's perfectly fine. For example, when I was living in Chicago, Illinois, I found it challenging at first to use English in everyday situations. I remember the first time I ordered coffee at a cafe. My hands were shaking as I tried to ask for a cappuccino. The words didn't come out smoothly, and I felt embarrassed. But then I took a deep breath, and the barista was patient with me. After a few tries, I finally said it right, and I left the cafe with my coffee and a big smile. That small victory made me realize that even though I wasn't fluent yet, I was still making progress. So my advice is to be patient with yourself. It's normal to have good days and bad days. The most important thing is to keep going and never give up. One thing that helped me stay focused was setting specific goals. Saying, "I want to learn English" is a great idea, but it's a big, vague goal. To make it easier, I broke it down into smaller, more achievable goals. For example, one week I focused on learning 10 new words. I made sure to use them in sentences and practice them until I felt comfortable. The next week, I set a new goal to have a 5-minute conversation in English. These small goals kept me motivated because I could clearly see my progress. Every time I reached a goal, no matter how small it was, I celebrated. Whether it was learning those 10 new words or completing a conversation, I felt proud of myself, and that gave me the energy to keep going. Speaking of goals, I once set a really big one for myself, giving a presentation in English. It was for a work project, and I was terrified. I practiced for weeks, going over my speech again and again. I wanted to make sure I knew all the words and phrases I needed to use. When the day finally came, I was so nervous that my hands were shaking, and I almost forgot some of the words. But I pushed through. I stumbled over a few sentences and even forgot a line or two, but I managed to get through the entire presentation in English. Afterward, I felt such a sense of accomplishment. It taught me that sometimes pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is scary, but it's the only way to grow. If I hadn't taken that step, I wouldn't have known how much I was capable of. Another thing that made my English learning journey more enjoyable was connecting it with things I loved. For example, I've always been a huge fan of football. I realized I could make learning English more fun by watching football matches with English commentary. At first, it was difficult to understand the fast-paced talking, but over time my listening skills improved. The more I watched, the more I could understand what was being said. Eventually, I didn't even need subtitles. The key is to find something you enjoy and make it a part of your learning process. It could be books, movies, music, or even sports. When you're having fun, you'll forget that you're learning, and that makes it a lot easier to stay motivated. One of the best parts of my journey was making friends from different countries who were also learning English. We would help each other with vocabulary, grammar, and even pronunciation. Since we were all at different levels, we could teach each other new things. Having a community of learners made everything more fun. We would laugh at our mistakes together, share tips, and motivate each other to keep going. I remember when one of my friends from Mexico City accidentally said, "I have hungry," instead of "I am hungry." And we all laughed. Mistakes are a normal part of learning, and having people who understand what you're going through can make the journey feel less lonely. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far I've come. There were so many times when I thought I'd never be able to speak English fluently, but here I am, sharing my story with you in English. If I can do it, so can you. Remember the tips I've shared. Be patient, don't be afraid to make mistakes, set achievable goals, and enjoy the process. It won't always be easy, but every step you take brings you closer to fluency. One day, you'll look back and realize how much you've learned. You might even laugh at some of the mistakes you made along the way, but trust me, it will all be worth it in the end. After I started feeling more comfortable with everyday English, something new came up that I wasn't expecting: formal English. This is the kind of English you use in professional settings, like writing emails for work or speaking in a more serious, respectful tone. It's one thing to chat with friends or order food at a cafe, but it's a completely different challenge when you need to sound professional. I realized that while I was doing well with casual English, I still had a lot to learn about using the language in formal situations. So I shifted my focus to learning formal phrases and polite expressions. I wasn't sure where to start, so I began by looking at examples of formal emails and conversations online. One thing I noticed right away was how important politeness is in formal English. For example, instead of saying, "Give me the report," you'd say, "Could you please send me the report?" Instead of saying, "I don't agree," you might say, "I'm afraid I have to disagree." It's all about softening your tone to sound more respectful. One of the best resources I found for improving my formal English was TED Talks. These are speeches on all kinds of topics, and the speakers often use more formal language. I would watch them with subtitles, pausing whenever I heard a phrase or sentence structure that seemed useful. Then I'd try to use those same phrases when writing or speaking in formal situations. Around the same time, I had to give a presentation in English for a job interview. This wasn't just a school presentation, it was for a part-time job at a company in New York where English was the main language. Part of the interview process was giving a short presentation on a project I had worked on. I spent hours practicing and made sure to prepare answers to typical interview questions like, "Why do you want this job?" and "What are your strengths and weaknesses?" Here's a tip. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, practice speaking out loud in front of a mirror. It might feel strange at first, but it really helps. I looked at myself in the mirror, pretended I was talking to the interviewer, and went over my answers again and again. It helped me feel more confident when the actual interview day came. And guess what? I got the job. That was a huge milestone for me. I wasn't just using English in casual conversations anymore. I was using it in a professional setting, and it felt incredible. Working in an English-speaking environment taught me even more about how language changes depending on the situation. In the office, I started to notice something I call business English. It's a bit more formal than everyday conversation, but not as stiff as formal writing. There are phrases people use all the time in meetings or emails like circle back, touch base, or moving forward. At first, these expressions sounded strange to me, but after hearing them again and again, I started using them too. I also learned how important it is to listen and understand in professional settings. Communication isn't just about the words you use, it's about how you use them to build relationships with coworkers, clients, and friends. Whether it's contributing to a meeting, responding to feedback, or working through disagreements, it all comes down to how well you communicate. Through this experience, I also improved my writing skills. I had to write emails, reports, and longer documents in English. Writing is different from speaking because you have more time to think, but that also means you need to be extra careful about grammar and word choice. At first, my emails were too long, and my tone wasn't quite right, but over time I got better. A helpful trick I found was to read well-written materials like emails from my manager or reports from other teams. I paid attention to how they structured their sentences and which words they used. Then I tried to imitate that style in my own writing. It's funny. I never thought reading work emails would be part of my English learning journey, but it turned out to be one of the most useful tools for improving my professional English. And little by little, I got better at it. As I continued in my job, I realized just how important listening and understanding are in fast-paced work environments. Conversations often happen quickly. In normal situations, people might slow down or repeat things if you don't understand, but in a workplace, especially during meetings, people tend to speak fast, use technical terms, or throw around industry-specific words. This can make it difficult to follow the conversation if you're not well prepared. When I started working at a company in New York, I noticed that in meetings everyone talked fast, used business jargon, and it was easy to feel lost. I realized I needed to do something to keep up, so I made some changes that really helped me improve my understanding of English in professional settings. The first thing I did was start taking notes during meetings. At first, I didn't write down everything because I couldn't keep up. Instead, I focused on writing down important words or phrases that I didn't understand. Later, I would look up those words or ask someone for their meaning. Over time, I built up a list of common words and terms that were used regularly in my field. For example, words like KP is, ROI, or benchmarking were thrown around in almost every meeting. Once I understood them, I felt much more confident. Taking notes helped me stay engaged and understand the discussions better. One of the most important things I learned was to never be afraid to ask questions. If I didn't understand something during the meeting, I would ask for clarification. There is absolutely no shame in asking questions. In fact, it shows that you are paying attention and that you want to understand things clearly. Asking for clarification actually made me feel more confident because I knew I was getting the right information. My colleagues appreciated that I was trying to get things right, and it helped me become more comfortable in those fast-paced conversations. Another thing I did was start listening to podcasts about business and work-related topics in English. Living in Mumbai, I had to commute for work, so I used my travel time to listen to podcasts. This was a great way to expose myself to professional English. In the beginning, I had to pause and rewind a lot because the speakers would talk quickly and use words I didn't know. But after a few weeks, I realized that I was understanding more and more without needing to pause. My brain was adjusting to the speed and vocabulary that people use in the workplace. This made me feel more confident when I had to listen to fast conversations in meetings or at work. One of the biggest steps that helped me improve was when I had the chance to travel for a business trip to London. It was my first time being fully surrounded by English speakers. Everything from ordering food in restaurants to attending business meetings was done in English. I had to think in English all the time, and this experience really pushed me to improve quickly. Being in an English-speaking environment helped me get used to hearing and speaking English all day. It was one of the best learning experiences I've ever had because it forced me to use the language constantly. If you can, I highly recommend traveling to an English-speaking country, even if it's just for a short time. But if traveling isn't possible, you can create an English environment at home. Surround yourself with English media like TV shows, podcasts, or conversations. The more you expose yourself to English, the faster you will improve. Watching videos or listening to English conversations will help your brain get used to the language, and over time you will notice improvement. Looking back, I've come a long way from feeling nervous and confused in fast-paced conversations to feeling confident and comfortable. I've learned that mastering a language takes time, patience, and a lot of practice. But it's not just about learning words. It's about connecting with people and understanding different cultures. So if you are still on your English learning journey, keep going. Every step you take brings you closer to fluency, and every mistake is a lesson that helps you grow. There's always more to learn, but remember, it's worth it. Thanks for watching. I hope these tips help make learning English easier for you. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to English Flow for more lessons and tips. Also, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. If you have any questions or want to share your own tips, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.